The massive Draconian warships emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts, their dark hulls blocking out the distant stars. High Admiral Kazoth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Emperor's Fang, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he watched Earth grow larger on the main display screen. "Status report," he commanded, his deep voice echoing across the silent bridge. 300 warships in perfect formation. High Admiral, his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vex, replied. "Earth's primitive detection systems have already spotted us. They're scrambling their defensive fleet." Kazoth's lips curled into what passed for a smile among his species. The humans' response was pathetic, barely 50 ships rising from their planet's surface and near-orbit stations. Their vessels looked like children's toys compared to the mighty Draconian fleet. "Open a broadcast channel to their leadership," Kazoth ordered. "Let's get this over with quickly." The communications officer worked at his station, his clawed fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "Channel open, sir. Broadcasting on all Earth frequencies." Kazoth straightened his ceremonial armor and began the speech he had given to countless worlds before. "People of Earth, I am High Admiral Kazoth of the Draconian hegemony. Your world now stands at the threshold of a great transformation. Submit to hegemony rule, and you will be granted the privilege of serving the greatest empire the galaxy has ever known. Resist, and we will turn your cities to ash." He waited for the panic, the desperate pleas, or the futile threats that usually followed such announcements. Instead, there was only silence. After several moments, a simple text message appeared on his screen. "Message received. Please stand by for Earth's unified response." Something about the message made the scales on the back of Kazoth's neck rise. No screaming. No chaos on their communication channels. No emergency broadcasts. Just calm. "Sir," Vex said, checking his instruments, "we're detecting unusual movement patterns from their fleet. They're not taking defensive positions." Kazoth leaned forward, studying the tactical display. The Earth ships were indeed moving strangely, spreading out in a pattern he didn't recognize. They weren't preparing for battle, but they weren't retreating either. They were just waiting. "Show me their weapons' power readings," he commanded. "That's another strange thing, sir," Vex replied. "Their weapons aren't powered up. Their shields are at minimal levels. It's almost as if they don't see us as a threat," Kazoth finished, feeling a strange unease settle in his stomach. A new message flashed across his screen. "Earth's representatives are prepared for diplomatic contact at your convenience. We suggest a face-to-face meeting to discuss matters of mutual interest." Kazoth had conquered 32 worlds for the hegemony. He had faced desperate last stands, suicide attacks, and pitiful surrenders, but he had never encountered this, a primitive species facing overwhelming force with what appeared to be complete confidence. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "should we begin targeting their major cities?" Kazoth stared at Earth hanging in space before them, beautiful and blue and somehow unsettling. "No," he said finally, "something isn't right here. Accept their offer for a meeting, but double-check all our bioshields and security protocols first." As his crew rushed to comply with his orders, Kazoth couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something obvious. The humans were acting like they had been expecting this invasion, like they were prepared for it, like they knew something he didn't. And in his long military career, ignorance had always been the deadliest enemy of all. 3 Earth representatives stood in the Emperor's Fang's meeting chamber, looking far too relaxed for people facing the galaxy's most powerful fleet. Kazoth studied them carefully, 2 females and 1 male, all wearing simple white uniforms with a blue Earth logo. "Welcome aboard," Kazoth said, his translator converting his words to Earth's English. "I trust our scanning systems didn't cause you any discomfort." Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead human scientist, smiled warmly. "Not at all, Admiral. In fact, we were fascinated by your biosecurity protocols. Would you mind if we asked a few questions about your ship's air filtration system? Kazoth blinked his double eyelids in confusion. These humans were about to lose their freedom, yet they wanted to discuss air filters. You do understand why you're here? He asked. Of course, Dr. James Rodriguez, the male representative, replied while taking notes on a small device. But since we're here, we might as well learn from each other. For example, I notice your species has fascinating dermal patterns. Is that natural scaling, or has there been some genetic modification? Sub-Commander Vex shifted uncomfortably beside Kazoth. This wasn't how surrender negotiations usually went. Enough games, Kazoth growled. You will sign these submission documents, or we will begin bombing your major cities within the hour. The third human, Dr. Maria Thompson, raised her hand like a student in class. Before we discuss that, would you mind if we took some air samples? It's just that your ship's atmosphere has such an interesting mix of gases. Kazoth slammed his scaled fist on the table. This is not a scientific expedition. Everything is a scientific expedition, Admiral, Dr. Chen said, still smiling. By the way, has anyone in your crew been feeling unusually tired lately? The question caught Kazoth off guard. Just this morning, his medical bay had reported several crew members coming in with complaints of drowsiness. He pushed the thought aside. Sign the documents, he demanded. Did you know, Dr. Rodriguez continued as if Kazoth hadn't spoken, that humans have evolved alongside millions of bacterial species. Our bodies are practically walking ecosystems. Fascinating, isn't it? A young Draconian officer rushed into the room, forgetting to salute in his hurry. Sir, the medical bay reports 30 new cases of unexplained fatigue in the last hour. The humans exchanged glances that made Kazoth's scales itch. What have you done? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. Us. Dr. Thompson looked surprised. We're just having a pleasant conversation about biology. Speaking of which, how long can Draconians go without sleep? Vex swayed slightly beside him, catching himself on the table. Sir, I'm not feeling. Meeting's over, Kazoth snapped, reaching for his communication device. Security, escort our guests back to their shuttle. Of course, Dr. Chen stood up smoothly. We look forward to continuing our discussion once everyone's had a good rest. As the humans were let out, Kazoth received 3 more urgent messages about crew members falling asleep at their posts. Through the ship's windows, he could see Earth's small fleet still maintaining their strange formation. They hadn't fired a single shot, hadn't made a single threat. They didn't need to. Sir, Vex said, his voice slurring slightly, I think we should run more detailed scans on. His eyes rolled back, and Kazoth barely caught him before he hit the floor. The Admiral looked at his unconscious second-in-command, then at his own trembling hands. Whatever the humans had done, it was already too late to stop it. The mighty Draconian fleet had sailed into a trap, not one of weapons or warfare, but of something far more ancient and unstoppable. High Admiral Kazoth stared at the growing list of silent ships on his display screen. In just 6 hours, 20 vessels at the fleet's outer edge had stopped responding to communications. His hand shook as he read the reports from the investigation teams. All crew members are alive, sir, the medical officer reported through the screen. They're just sleeping. We can't wake them up. Their vital signs are normal, almost peaceful. Kazoth rubbed his tired eyes. The same drowsiness that had taken Vex was creeping into his own mind now. Half his bridge crew had already been replaced with fresh officers from lower decks. Play the last transmission from the Silent Wing, he ordered. The screen flickered to life, showing Captain Rix of the Silent Wing. In the recording, the captain's eyes were already heavy. Something's in the air, spreading through, can't stay awake. The video ended with the sound of his head hitting the control panel. Sir, a young communications officer called out. Another message from Earth. The human transmission appeared on the main screen. The Draconian fleet is welcome to remain in Earth orbit for approximately 2 weeks. We will ensure your ships maintain stable trajectories while your crews rest. There is no need for alarm. No need for alarm. Kizoth wanted to laugh. His mighty invasion fleet was falling asleep one ship at a time, and the humans were acting like they were running a hotel. Status of our weapons systems, he asked. All weapons are operational, sir, his tactical officer replied, fighting back a yawn. But we're running into a problem. The gunners keep falling asleep at their stations. We can't maintain proper targeting. Through the window, Kizoth could see Earth's small fleet. They hadn't moved from their positions. They hadn't fired a single shot. They were just watching. Send another team to the medical bay, Kizoth ordered. I want to know what's causing this, and get me a direct line to the human leaders. Admiral, his science officer interrupted. I found something strange in our air samples. There's some kind of biological agent. It's microscopic, but it's everywhere. It passed right through our shields like they weren't even there. The main screen lit up with another message from Earth. We notice your science teams are investigating the situation. Would you like us to explain the modified bacteria's life cycle? It might help your research teams. Kizoth's vision blurred slightly. He gripped his command chair to stay upright. Modified bacteria, he muttered. Sir, the tactical officer called out, his voice weak. 5 more ships just went silent. And I think I need to. He slumped forward onto his console, soft snores escaping him. Kizoth looked around his bridge. Half the remaining crew were fighting to keep their eyes open. Outside, the stars seemed to spin slightly. Send a message to all ships, he ordered, his tongue feeling heavy. Full quarantine protocols. No contact between ships. We have to contain. But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. Whatever the humans had done to them, it was already everywhere. In their air, in their lungs, in their blood. The mighty Draconian fleet, terror of the galaxy, was being defeated not by weapons or warriors, but by invisible enemies that had been waiting for them all along. As Kizoth struggled to stay awake, one final message flashed across his screen. Sleep well, Admiral. We'll talk again when you wake up. The stars kept spinning, and the silence kept spreading, and somewhere in the darkness of space, humanity's smallest soldiers continued their unstoppable march through the greatest fleet in the galaxy. Move the fleet back. Get us away from that planet, Kizoth ordered, his voice hoarse from fighting exhaustion. He watched as his remaining active ships struggled to maintain formation while retreating from Earth. In the Emperor's Fang's main laboratory, Chief Scientist Zara worked frantically, her scaled hands shaking as she examined samples under a molecular scanner. 60 ships had gone completely silent now, their crews lost to peaceful slumber. Hi, Admiral, Zara called, her eyes wide. You need to see this. Kizoth stumbled to her station, catching himself on the edge of the desk. The scanner showed tiny organisms swimming across the screen, multiplying before his eyes. What am I looking at? He asked. It's alive, Zara whispered. The compound in our air filters. It's not a chemical weapon. It's some kind of modified life form. Look how it reproduces. On the screen, one tiny organism split into 2, then 4, then 8. Kizoth had never seen anything like it. Can we kill it? He demanded. We've tried everything, Zara said, rubbing her eyes. Heat, cold, radiation, poison. Nothing works. It's like it was designed to survive anything we might throw at it. A young officer rushed into the lab, forgetting proper protocol in his hurry. Sir, 3 more ships just went dark, and we're getting strange readings from the jump drives. Zoth followed him back to the bridge, his legs feeling heavier with each step. The tactical display showed more red dots than green now, more sleeping ships than active ones. What's wrong with the jump drives? He asked. They're working perfectly, sir, the officer replied. That's what's strange. Everything's functional. We just We can't keep the crews awake long enough to operate them. Another message from Earth appeared on the main screen. We notice you're attempting to study the bacteria. Would you like us to send over our research notes? It might help you understand what's happening. Kzoth hissed in frustration. The human's calm helpfulness was almost worse than any threat. Sir, Zara called from her station. I found something in our old records. 300 years ago, a hegemony scout ship discovered Earth. They reported the humans were unique in the galaxy because they evolved alongside millions of species of bacteria. Our scientists dismissed it as primitive. But they weren't primitive at all, Kzoth finished. They were learning, adapting, preparing. A crew member collapsed nearby, sliding peacefully to the floor. No one moved to help. They'd run out of replacement staff hours ago. New message from Earth. Sir, the communications officer said, fighting to keep his eyes open. The screen flickered. Your fleet's current orbit is stable. We've calculated drift patterns and have positioned our ships to make minor corrections while you sleep. Your crew's vital signs are being monitored. Everything is proceeding exactly as expected. Kzoth stared at the message, finally understanding. The humans hadn't built better weapons or stronger ships. They'd done something far more terrifying. They'd turned their own weaknesses into strengths. Send to all remaining active ships, he ordered, his voice slurring slightly. Maintain distance from Earth. Do not attempt to. He didn't finish the order. His legs gave out, and as strong hands caught him. He saw Zara slumping over her microscope, her scaled cheek resting against the eyepiece. The last thing Kzoth heard before darkness took him was another calm message from Earth. Sweet dreams. Admiral, the war will be over when you wake up. Junior scientist Kira was the last one still awake in the Emperor's Fang's laboratory. Her small size meant she needed more of the sleep-inducing bacteria to be affected, giving her precious extra minutes to study their enemy. Scattered around her were the sleeping forms of her fellow scientists, including Chief Scientist Zara and High Admiral Kzoth himself. Computer, run another scan on Sample 47, she ordered, her words slightly slurred. Compare it to the Earth biological database we downloaded before the invasion. The computer hummed quietly while working. Kira fought to keep her eyes open, recording what might be her final log entry. This is Junior Scientist Kira of the Draconian fleet. She spoke into the recorder. I believe I've discovered what the humans have done to us. And it's brilliant. Terrifying, but brilliant. The computer beeped, showing its results. Kira leaned forward, her scaled hands trembling as she read the display. The bacteria attacking us. It's not a weapon they created from scratch. It's something that was already living inside them. A probiotic bacteria, one of millions they evolved with. They just modified it, changed it to target our specific brain chemistry. She pulled up more data on the screen, fighting the heaviness in her limbs. The humans found our weakness decades ago, when they captured that scout ship. They studied our biology secretly, learned everything about us. Then they took their own helpful bacteria, the kind that helps them digest food, and turned it into a perfect weapon. A message from Earth flashed on her screen. Excellent work, Junior Scientist Kira. Your understanding of our bacterial modification program is impressive. Kira laughed weakly. You've been watching me work, haven't you? Of course, came the reply. We've monitored all your research efforts. Would you like to know what happens next? I think I already know, Kira said, her head growing heavier. The bacteria's in our air systems. It's self-replicating. It's probably already spread through half the local star cluster by now. Correct, the humans responded. But don't worry. It has a limited lifespan. 2 weeks of sleep. Then it dies naturally. No lasting harm done. Kira struggled to make one final recording. To any who find this, the humans didn't beat us with technology. They beat us with biology. They turned their greatest weakness, their dependence on bacteria, into their strongest weapon. Her head dropped onto the console. The recorder kept running, picking up her soft, peaceful breathing. The laboratory's main screen lit up with a final message from Earth, research log archived and saved. Thank you for your contributions to xenobacterial science. Junior Scientist Kira. We look forward to discussing your findings when you wake up. Through the laboratory windows, Earth's small fleet could be seen moving between the sleeping Draconian ships, gently adjusting their orbits to keep them safe. The humans had prepared this defense for over 50 years, turning their own bacterial allies into an unstoppable weapon. The mighty Draconian fleet, which had expected to face primitive weapons and basic space combat, had instead met an enemy that had mastered life itself, not by destroying it, but by understanding it, nurturing it, and carefully guiding it to protect their world. As the last lights in the laboratory dimmed to night mode, Junior Scientist Kira slept peacefully among her colleagues, while trillions of microscopic soldiers continued their quiet work in the darkness of space. The last 40 ships of the once mighty Draconian fleet fired their engines in desperation. On the bridge of the Emperor's Fang, Second Lieutenant Thax commanded a skeleton crew of the few remaining awake officers. Most were very young or very small, needing more of the bacteria to be affected. Full power to the engines, Thax ordered. We have to warn the reinforcement fleet. Long-range scanners had detected a massive group of hegemony warships approaching. They were responding to Kazoth's last distress call, but they had no idea they were flying straight into a trap. Sir, a young navigator called out, her voice thick with exhaustion. 3 more ships just dropped out of formation. Their crews, they're all asleep. Thax watched the tactical display in horror. More red dots appeared as ships went dark, their crews succumbing to the human bacteria. The sleeping ships drifted peacefully in space, their engines cold. Message from Earth, sir, the communications officer said, fighting to keep his eyes open. The screen showed the now familiar calm text. Please reconsider your departure. Your ship's current trajectories are unsafe. We don't want any accidents while your crews rest. Ignore them. Thax growled. Plot a course out of the system. We'll use the jump drives as soon as we're clear. A science officer who had been studying Junior Scientist Kira's last reports looked up in alarm. Sir, we can't jump. The bacteria. It's already in our ship's air systems. If we jump now, we'll spread it across the entire. She didn't finish her sentence, sliding peacefully to the floor in mid-warning. Sir, the tactical officer shouted. The reinforcement fleet. They're almost in range. 5,000 ships, sir. The largest fleet the hegemony has ever assembled. Thax realized with growing horror what that meant. 5,000 ships, all with recycled air systems just like theirs. All vulnerable to the human's bacterial weapon. Send a warning, he ordered. Tell them to stay away. Tell them. His words were cut off by another message from Earth. We've detected your reinforcement fleet. Don't worry. We've calculated their arrival trajectory and prepared safe orbits for all 5,000 ships. Our fleet will ensure none of them drift into hazardous areas while their crews sleep. How? Thax stared at the screen in disbelief. How did they know exactly how many ships were coming? The navigator slumped over her console, gentle snores escaping her. The tactical officer followed moments later. Thax looked around his bridge, watching as his last remaining crew members lost their battle with sleep one by one. Through the main window, he could see Earth's small fleet moving with precise purpose, taking up positions to safely guide the arriving reinforcements. The humans had turned space itself into their weapon, filling it with invisible soldiers that no shield could stop. As his own eyes grew heavy, one final message appeared on his screen. Rest well, Lieutenant Thax. You'll be happy to know that your retreat attempt helped spread our bacterial defense system through an additional 12 star systems. When you wake up, the galaxy will be a very different place. Thax tried to respond, but his fingers were too heavy to reach the controls. As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, he saw the first ships of the reinforcement fleet appearing in the distance. They were coming to save the invasion fleet. Instead, they were about to join them in their peaceful slumber, while humanity's smallest warriors continued their invisible conquest of space. High Admiral K'Zoth woke briefly in his command chair, fighting against the peaceful drowsiness that had claimed most of his fleet. Around him, his bridge crew lay sleeping at their stations, their breathing slow and steady. Through the windows, he could see Earth's ships moving carefully between the dormant Draconian vessels, making sure none drifted into danger. With trembling hands, he activated his emergency recorder. Even now, as sleep tried to claim him again, he had to warn the hegemony about what humanity had truly become. "This is High Admiral K'Zoth," he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "To any hegemony forces that receive this message, Earth is not what we thought. They are not primitive. They are not weak. They are masters of evolution itself." He paused, fighting to keep his eyes open, as he watched the first ships of the reinforcement fleet arrive. Already, their communications were becoming confused and sluggish as the bacteria spread through their systems. "The humans didn't build better weapons," he continued. "They didn't need to. They took the very building blocks of life, the bacteria they evolved with, and turned them into an unstoppable army. He yawned deeply. "They weaponized evolution itself." A new message appeared on his screen from Dr. Sarah Chen, the human scientist he'd met what felt like years ago. "Excellent summary, Admiral. Would you like to know how long we've been preparing this defense?" K'Zoth tried to focus on the words. How long?" "Since your scout ship visited 50 years ago," came the reply. "We captured one crew member, studied their biology, learned everything about Draconian brain chemistry. Then we started modifying our friendly bacteria, the ones that help us digest food, to become the perfect defense system." "But," K'Zoth struggled to form the words, "but why make it so gentle? Why just make us sleep?" "Because we're not like you, Admiral," Dr. Chen wrote back. "We don't need to destroy to win. In 2 weeks, you'll all wake up. The bacteria will be dead. No one had to die. And every species in the galaxy will know that attacking Earth means taking a very long nap." K'Zoth looked at his tactical display one last time. The reinforcement fleet was arriving in waves, their crews falling asleep as they entered the bacteria-filled space. 5,000 ships, the pride of the hegemony, all drifting peacefully in Earth's orbit. Final log entry, he mumbled into the recorder. "The humans, they didn't just defeat us. They changed the rules of warfare. They turned their greatest weakness into their strongest weapon. And they did it so quietly, so perfectly, that we never saw it coming until—" Another yawn escaped him. "Until it was too late." His head nodded forward, then jerked up one last time as a final message scrolled across his screen. "Sleep well, Admiral K'Zoth. When you wake up, we'll have peace treaties ready to sign. And remember, this was just one strain of bacteria modified for Draconian biology. We have thousands more ready for any other species that might try to invade. Earth will never be conquered, not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we learn to work with the smallest life forms instead of ignoring them." The recorder caught K'Zoth's last whispered words before sleep took him. "They truly are masters of life itself." Then there was only the gentle sound of breathing throughout the mighty warship, as Earth's invisible soldiers stood guard over their sleeping victory. 3 weeks after the invasion began, High Admiral K'Zoth opened his eyes to find himself still in his command chair. His mouth felt dry, and his muscles were stiff, but he was otherwise unharmed. Around him, his bridge crew was slowly waking up, looking confused but healthy. "Status report," he croaked, his voice rough from weeks of disuse. "All crews reporting in, sir," his communications officer replied, checking the screens. "No casualties. Every single person in the fleet is alive and well. The humans, they kept their word." Through the main window, Kazoth could see the massive reinforcement fleet floating peacefully alongside his own ships. 5,300 vessels, all perfectly arranged in stable orbits. Earth's small fleet moved between them, still watching carefully. A message appeared on his screen. "Welcome back, Admiral. Are you ready to discuss peace terms?" Before he could respond, his science officer called out, "Sir, the bacteria, it's gone. Just like they said. Completely dead, leaving no trace in our systems." The door to the bridge slid open, and the 3 human representatives walked in, still wearing their simple white uniforms. Dr. Chen carried a data tablet, while Dr. Rodriguez held what looked like a peace treaty. "Good morning, Admiral," Dr. Chen said warmly. "Did you sleep well?" Kazoth straightened in his chair, trying to maintain his dignity. "You realize what you've done. The hegemony will never—" "The hegemony," Dr. Thompson interrupted gently, "has already received our message. While you were sleeping, we sent the full data about our bacterial defense system to every major power in the galaxy. Would you like to know their responses?" She handed him her tablet. On it were messages from dozens of alien civilizations, all saying variations of the same thing. Earth must be recognized as a sovereign power. A species that could turn bacteria into such a precise and peaceful weapon was not to be underestimated. But this was just one defense, Dr. Chen explained. "We have thousands of modified bacterial strains ready, each designed for different alien biologies. Any species that tries to invade Earth will face their own specially designed sleeping bacteria." Kazoth looked at the peace treaty in Dr. Rodriguez's hands. "You planned this for 50 years. Longer," Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "We knew we weren't alone in the galaxy. We knew someone would try to conquer us eventually. So instead of building bigger guns or faster ships, we looked to our smallest allies. The treaty is simple," Dr. Thompson said. "Earth remains free. In exchange, we share some of our bacterial modification technology for peaceful purposes only. Medical applications, mostly. Your people could benefit greatly from this science." Kazoth took the treaty with trembling hands. His entire fleet had been defeated without a single shot fired, a single life lost, or a single ship damage. The humans had turned their own bacterial weaknesses into their greatest strength, and in doing so, they had changed the rules of galactic warfare forever. As he signed the treaty, a final message appeared on his screen. This one from the hegemony itself. "Peace treaty approved. Earth to be recognized as a sovereign power. Their bacterial defense technology makes them unconquerable. Let this be a lesson. True power comes not from destruction, but from understanding life itself." Outside the ship's windows, Earth's small fleet finally stood down from their guard positions. They had won their victory not through force or violence, but through patience, wisdom, and the help of countless microscopic allies. The galaxy would never be the same again.